Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple more holiday cards, which happy December. For those not aware, I'm not sure what year this started. I've been working with Simon Says Stamp for many, many years now, and my brain is mush. But anyway, December is just something Simon started doing years ago. And it's just a big release, kind of like their other releases, but it's mostly wafer dies. None of this is limited edition. A lot of people get it confused with Stamptember, which the Stamptember exclusive collabs, you know, the limited edition, all of that. Totally separate. This is all part of their regular release. Things will be restocked, etc. So it's just something fun that Simon Says Stamp does. And then there's like other random exclusives, different things in the month as well. So just stay tuned for all of the things. So I've got a video using some of the new products. I will have more videos coming as always. Yeah, I had a hard time choosing what to start with, but I used this Snowflake Burst Pinpoint plate, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I used that. I used this gorgeous, elegant Ornament wafer die. I used some other wafer dies. I used an oldie but goodie CZ Design Sentiment wafer die. I used one of these stamp sets. So I just basically did a whole bunch of die cutting, and then I assembled. I didn't add any splatter. I know. Yeah, I just used die cuts and cardstock. But if you wanted to step it up, you could just die cut, you know, watercolor paper, do the ink smushing. I like doing that too. I'm sure I'll have videos coming doing that. I really love creating things, you know, my card fronts, scenes, etc. with die cuts. And these ones are no exception. So, as always, I will have a link at the end of the video to my Holiday 2023 playlist. And yeah, keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. So I don't always show my thought process. How do you show a thought process? But I don't always show these sorts of things on camera because 99% of the time I don't lay things out like this. It's just randomness in my head, or I'm sketching things down, you know, in my little card maker sketchbook or post-it notes, things like that. But I had a rough idea of what I wanted to do for this card, because I knew, you know, I wanted to use that Ornament wafer die. I wanted to use that Snowflake Burst background. And so I laid them out onto my desk, and just kind of gave me a little bit of a visual. It's like, because I knew I wanted to use some of the there's like some different greenery wafer dies that have been released. And yeah, I was just kind of figuring out my placement, getting, you know, wrapping my mind around it. I already had my colors picked out because I was in a purple mood, so that's what I went with. So I already had the colors picked out. Usually it's like I kind of figure out what I'm going to use and then the colors, but this time it was like the colors were chosen like immediately because that's just what I was going for. And then everything else was kind of built around that. So I figured out which little greenery wafer dies I wanted to use, which was the new 2 Stems and Berries die set, and then there's this long leaf pine sprig wafer die set. So once I had knew what I was going to use, had a rough idea of my layout, I then took all my cardstock and got that ready before I started die cutting. I've talked about this many times. I always reach for scraps first. With all of these ones, I didn't have any scraps, so I was just cutting into mostly full sheets of cardstock, but I always go for my scraps first, especially when I'm die cutting, because that's how I use them up. And then if I don't have scraps, or if I don't have any that are, you know, big enough, that's when I'll start grabbing the full sheets. And I just cut out the pieces I thought I would need. I just use my big old Tim Holtz shears for all of that. And I just create little piles with, you know, especially if I'm doing multiples. And in this case, I was, because I was going to make 2 cards. So I just would make little piles of the cardstock with whatever, you know, die or die part I was using. And then I did all of my die cutting, which this time I couldn't show on camera. Those that watch my live streams know that I have had an Griffin EMPRESS machine actually sitting here for a couple months now. Been waiting because I just didn't have the space. I finally made space because I was like, it's December. Time to use the Big Daddy machine, you know, that I have been looking forward to. Let's just say right off the bat, I already love it, even though I use it just to make these cards. That's it. But that was still a fair bit of die cutting. Like, I die cut many pieces with this machine, and right now I'm loving it. Anyway, we'll get more into it. But because it's off to the side, I can't film myself die cutting. I will have to figure out a whole new setup for that. That's down the road. Anywho, I die cut all my pieces. One thing I'm really kind of loving about this Elegant Ornament wafer die is you can really change it up depending on how you want to assemble it and what you die cut it from. You know, because you could inlay those pieces in the center. You could use other pieces that I didn't use, like in the other portions. Like you can really mix it up and change the colors, etc., etc. And I was like, oh, I could have fun with this. I kept it fairly basic, except for those kind of glittery portions. I die cut some of Simon's Luxe glitter cardstock, and that just kind of reminded me of, like, you know, the old vintage like mercury glass ornaments. And then of course I start getting on that tangent, and I'm like, oh man, again, if I had the space and the time and the energy and the budget, I would love to start collecting those types of ornaments. But anyway, I make them myself with paper and I'm good. So I did all of that. And then for my sentiment, this is an oldie but goodie wafer die. This is the CZ Design Joyful wafer die. And I just die cut like some white cardstock, and the plum cardstock is the one I don't have a source for. It was in my stash and I'm not even sure. It's old. I've had it for many years. All the other cardstocks I used were Concord 9th and some Simon Says Stamp for the lighter green. And then of course Simon's heavyweight white cardstock. And yeah, I'll have links to all the things that I used in the description box below as always. So after I'd done all my die cutting and had assembled my ornaments and assembled the sentiments, I trimmed down the background that was die cut with the Snowflake Burst Pinpoint. This one, man, it is... I've said this before, I really like the background wafer dies that just pierce instead of cut and just create like all this detail. And this one is no exception. It's gorgeous. So I trimmed it down because it was A2 sized, but I just trimmed about 1/8 of an inch off all the edges. So it'll be slightly smaller than my A2 card bases. And then I adhered the ornament with just some thin foam squares. And I attached some DMC silver thread to the top of it, taped the thread to the back as you saw with just some washi tape, so it kind of looks like it's hanging from the top of the card. And then I pulled out some ribbon from my stash and actually added ribbon to my cards. Again, those that have followed me for a long time remember back in the day, it was like I used ribbon on pretty much every card. I used to have a massive ribbon collection. Now it's just a drawer. I've got just a few, you know, that I reach for every once in a blue moon, and it comes in handy because I added ribbon to these. I just thought it'd be kind of a cute little touch. So I tied the ribbon, and off camera, when I was done all of these, I actually put like a blob of glue behind the knot of the ribbon just so it doesn't move around, or hopefully it doesn't come undone. And the sentiments I adhered, I just put some adhesive behind them and just kind of tucked them just under the bottom of the ornament there. And then once I've got those in place, then I'm going to start zhuzhing this up with the greenery bits. So I die cut the long leaf pine sprig. This one I can see myself using quite often because it's like this is what I call a filler, you know, so you can just kind of tuck it in here and there depending on what you're creating. And this one was just, it's a good size, and you get like, I die cut it twice, so I had enough, you know, for both card fronts, but it's like you got a bunch of pieces, and I was like, this is just, it's one of those ones that just kind of look not as interesting, and then it's always those ones that I end up reaching for the most. So I was like, ooh, that's kind of perfect. So I just kind of tucked it in behind the ornament there, and then I used this will be the mistletoe piece from the 2 Stems and Berries, because there's one that does like a holly sort of branch, but I die cut the mistletoe piece, and then there's a die cut. The die cut's like tons of little circles. Although you could skip this and use like pearls. That would look really pretty. I didn't think about that till I was done and like I'm editing the video, and I was like, I can't, because do I have white pearls in my stash? Of course I do. But whatever. I use the cardstock. It's fine. So I did all of that. Repeated the process on the second card. And then on the inside of the card, I'm stamping sentiments from the Joyful Greetings stamp set. And this big joyful word, one, they're brand new stamps. So with brand new stamps, you kind of need to condition them. They take ink better. If you find your ink is really beating up or it just kind of separating and your stamp isn't stamping properly and it's new, you just need to rub the stamp really well with your fingers. You can also use like a white eraser. That just helps kind of remove there's like a coating on good quality photopolymer stamps. It's just part of the manufacturing process when they wash them off when they're done. And yeah, inking up and stamping it multiple times on scrap paper also works, but I just rub the stamps with my fingers and they're good to go. So I stamped the large sentiment and then stamped a couple of the companion sentiments. There's a bunch of options in that set. And then I decided I wanted to add these little starbursts. And these little dudes just like to stick to people, you know, stick to the fingers. And this happens with like small stamps. So this is where I pulled out, and this is a mouthful to say this one, because I've shown this in a bunch of videos. This is the Simon Says Stamp Positively Perfect Placement Guides Large. It comes in handy though. It's a hefty little thing and it's got grid lines and stuff on it. So it's like, ooh, this will be nice to like also align sentiments. You know, when you're trying to get these stamps lined up and they want to stick to your fingers and they're driving you insane, something like that grid mat comes in really handy because the stamp, you can press them into that and they'll stick to that and not your fingers. So I got those little starbursts arranged where I wanted them. And those I stamped with Simon's Fawn Positively Saturated inks, just kind of a warm brown, just to kind of tie in that sort of champagne color of that glitter cardstock that I used, as well as the confetti that I added at the end. That's why I went with the Luxe glitter cardstock. This is the champagne confetti mix from the new release. And I just kind of sprinkled that throughout both of these card fronts and then adhered them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue. And once those were adhered, these cards were complete. So like I mentioned earlier, I will have a link below the video to the new release. I will have a link to my blog post. In the blog post, I'll have pictures and picture links and all the things. And of course, I'll have my supply list, linked to all the things I used. So you can check that out in the description box below if you are interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.